that chance to sort of transcendental eavesdropping, so to speak, you know, because we're getting a glimpse into these private conversations, incredible discussions that are happening between these devotees. What are which conversation is one of your favorites that you wish, or that you think, oh, that would have been a nice one to be with? Like which of the conversations in our scripture do you especially enjoy between two personalities? Yeah. In which section? Like which? Okay, just in the beginning. Yeah, yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah. Oh wow, yeah, yes, that's a powerful one. Yeah. Could you please repeat your question? Which conversation in scripture do you especially like to relish?
Prahlad Maharaj and his demon classmates would have been pretty epic to see that.
That would have been great. Yeah.
I picture him like getting up on the table and just,
yeah.
Wake up, kids. Come on.
Yeah, that would be a really great one to enter, to kind of see, witness, right? Yes, good. To the gopis? Yes. Radharani complaining to the gopis about Krishna. Okay, yeah. Very sweet.
I would say Draupadi and Krishna.
Draupadi and Krishna. Oh, nice. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Mirza. Ooh, Lord Chaitanya and Ramananda Roy. Yeah, that's a really sweet conversation in the Chaitanya Charitamrita. Okay, so yeah.
I really like the conversation between Narada Muni and Vyasadeva.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so here we're having a conversation. And there's so many of them, right? Because we have the Srimad Bhagavatam's filled with those. So it's just kind of a nice reminder to us that we're so blessed that we get a glimpse into these incredible conversations that were happening. Yes. Yeah. So we're going to be doing Canto 3, Chapter 6, text 35 to 40. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we can read these together. Narayanam namaskrityam naram chaiva narottamam devim saraswatim vyasam tato jayamudiraye nashtaprayeshu bhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati ruttamashoke bhakti bhavati naishtaki. So text 35. And then we'll come back to 36 and read the verse and purport for that one. Shruti, you can start.
O Vidura, who can estimate or measure the transcendental time, work, and potency of the gigantic form manifested by the internal potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead?
Okay, text 36.
In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste.
The highest professional gain of humanity is to engage in discussions of the activities and glories of the pious actor. Such activities are so nicely arranged in writing by the greatly learned sages that the actual purpose of the ear is served just by being near them.
O my son, the original poet, Brahma, after mature meditation for 1,000 celestial years, could know only that the glories of the Supreme Soul are inconceivable.
The wonderful potency of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is bewildering even to the jugglers. That potency is unknown even to the self-sufficient Lord, so it is certainly unknown to others.
Do they mean like jugglers, like with 3 balls? Word jugglers, yeah, the ones who like to theoretical, right? Getting really into mental word jugglery.
Words, mind, and ego, with their respective controlling demi, fail to access the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, we simply have to offer respectful obeisances unto him as a matter of sanity.
And that's the end of that chapter. Before we go to our verse, I want to just mention that for each of these verses, there's a purport, and several of them begin with the phrase, Prabhupada begins, the froggish philosophers. So the frog analogy, right? There's a story or kind of a metaphor of a frog who goes back to his well after having seen the ocean, and he's trying to describe to his frog friend how big the ocean was. And he's just going, it's big and so big, and he's puffing up at the same time, right, with his mouth or body. And eventually that doesn't, he kind of just doesn't survive that. It's kind of tragic. But the idea being that sometimes we get so full of ourselves, right? Because the frog analogy, like, oh, I saw the ocean. I'm so special. I saw this great thing. And so Prabhupada uses that as an adjective, the froggish philosophers. That's a very creative use of words. Okay, so text 36. We'll do the Sanskrit in the verse here. I'll read the translation again so we know the meaning of this verse. In spite of my inability, whatever I have been able to hear from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Okay. Tatapi kirtayam yanga yata mati yata shrutam kirtim hare svam sat kartum giram anya vidas satim. Please chant. Okay, word for word. Tata, therefore, api, although it is so. Kirtayami, I do describe. Anga, O Vidura, Yata, as much as. Mati, intelligence. Yata, as much as. Shrutam, heard. Kirtim, glories. Hare, of the Lord. Swam, own. Sat kartum, just purify. Giram, speeches. Anyabhida, otherwise. Asatim, unchaste. So you notice how kirtim or kirtayami, both of them are used in connection with glorifying the Lord. So sometimes when we say, let's do kirtan, we often mean musical singing together. But it can also mean to speak of the Lord, to glorify the Lord with our words or with our writing or any kind of glorification, any expression of glorification. Another word here is asatim, means unchaste. So we hear the pastime in Bhagavatam of Sati and Lord Shiva. And Sati means chaste, the chaste one, the loyal one, right? Like the one who's faithful. And asatim, unchaste. So in this connection, I'll read the translation again. In spite of my inability, says Maitreya, whatever I have been able to hear, and then Prabhupada puts between these parentheses, from the spiritual master, and whatever I could assimilate, I am now describing in glorification of the Lord by pure speech, for otherwise my power of speaking would remain unchaste. Purport. The purification of the conditioned soul necessitates purification of his consciousness. By the presence of consciousness, the presence of the transcendental soul is verified. And as soon as consciousness leaves the body, the material body is not active. Transcendental soul is verified. So if we see someone conscious, we know they're verified soul in there, right? Consciousness is perceived, therefore, by activities. The theory put forward by empiric philosophers that consciousness can remain in an inactive state is the proof of their poor fund of knowledge. One should not become unchaste by stopping the activities of pure consciousness. If the activities of pure consciousness are stopped, certainly the conscious living force will be otherwise engaged, because unless engaged, the consciousness has no standing. Consciousness can't be silent even for a moment. When the body does not act, the consciousness acts in the form of dreams. Unconsciousness is artificial. By induced extraneous help, it remains for a limited period. But when the intoxication of the drug is finished, or when one is awake, the consciousness again acts earnestly. Maitreya's statement is that in order to avoid unchaste conscious activities, he was trying to describe the unlimited glories of the Lord, although he did not have the ability to describe them perfectly. This glorification of the Lord is not a product of research, but the result of hearing submissively from the authority of the spiritual master. It is also not possible to repeat all that one has heard from the spiritual master, but one can narrate as far as possible by one's honest endeavor. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. And actually, we can never really get to the end of the Lord's glories. So you can never actually fully, right? Okay, finally we had a conclusive discussion on Krishna and that's it. We can't go any further, right? So it's not ever possible to fully describe the glories of the Lord. And Prabhupada saying that's okay. It does not matter whether the Lord's glories are fully explained or not. One must attempt to engage one's bodily, mental, and verbal activities in the transcendental glorification of the Lord. Otherwise, such activities will remain unchaste and impure. The existence of the conditioned soul can be purified only by the method of engaging mind and speech in the service of the Lord. The Tridandi sannyasi of the Vaishnava school accepts 3 rods, representing the vow to engage in the service of the Lord with body, mind, and speech. So the 3 rods, you know, there's stick, and then the 2 facing out, so it's 3, body, mind, and speech. Whereas the Ekadandi sannyasi takes the vow to become one with the Supreme, and they just have a solid stick that they walk with. Since the Lord is the Absolute, there is no distinction between him and his glories. The glories of the Lord, as chanted by the Vaishnava sannyasi, are as substantial as the Lord himself. And thus, while glorifying the Lord, the devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest. Amazing, huh? The devotee becomes one with him in transcendental interest, although he remains eternally a transcendental servitor. This simultaneously one and different position of the devotee makes him eternally purified, and thus his life becomes a complete success. So often Prabhupada has purports that have a beginning, a middle, and then this really wonderful end. It's kind of like a completion of a life. Our life becomes complete with this knowledge of simultaneous one and difference, right? So there's a few things in here that I was struck by when I was reading this, and I would like to talk about, especially this idea of, well, first, just the phrase in the next verse says, the purpose of the ear is served just by being near the descriptions of the activities and glories of the Lord, right? That's the purpose of the ear. Yeah. So I was thinking that's a nice phrase, the purpose of the ear. We don't often think about, at least I don't often move about life thinking, okay, what's the purpose of my tongue? What's the purpose of my eye? What's the purpose of my ear, right? And it suddenly gives, when we have a purpose, when we have a meaning, it suddenly gives some life, some motive. Okay, I have a purpose, right? So the purpose of my ear. In the material context, what do you think someone would say if you just asked them? Like, if you're walking down the street and you asked, you were one of those like YouTube what do you call it, interviewers? I used to, what do you think? What's the purpose of your ear? What would you hear like what would they say? To listen to music, okay? To communicate and hear things, yeah.
To relate to the sounds of life.
To relate to the sounds of life, yeah. Okay. Yes. Microphone in the back.
If you get a science student, he'll probably say something about survival or defending yourself, knowing danger is coming or something like that.
Right, to stay alert, right? Like your ears are here and you have two of them, so make sure that the sounds on both sides, you can hear them, and survival. Yes.
I'm a deaf person who has cochlear implants on both sides, so I cannot imagine living life without sound. That'd be a totally different life.
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, so many purposes when it comes to material function, right? We think, okay, the ear. But here, the purpose is completely on a transcendent level. So, purpose of the ear, and really, it's the physical ear, of course, but it's the ear of like in an more of a subtle way, the ear receiving the knowledge, taking it in, and actually absorbing it, right? That receptivity of the listener. I'm going to receive it through the method of the ear, because oftentimes we're moving about life, we hear things, but it doesn't stay, right? It doesn't stick in our consciousness necessarily. We might overhear a conversation and we're walking past it, it's over. So the ears can pick up a lot of sound that doesn't necessarily do anything. It doesn't change us in some way. But spiritual sound, when listened to with a lot of attention and devotion, then the power of that hearing, of that ear, so to speak, is transformative to the heart. It changes inside. So that's really different than mundane hearing. Even just one more thing on that, even if we, in our conversations with others, if we listen with attention, right? There's an aspect of attention that's important when we listen. When we're listening with attention, then we can really hear what that person's saying, and then we can respond accordingly. And that conversation can be so much deeper and more meaningful. Really, the other person feels really heard, and so on. So when you think about, again, these conversations we were talking about, like Draupadi and Krsna, Vyasadeva, Narada, all these conversations, Ramananda Roy, Lord Chaitanya, if you think about they were applying that transcendental ear. Less, I'm listening and I'm fully here in the moment listening. I'm really absorbing it, really taking it in, and not just taking it in and out, what is that? In one ear and out the other. There's an expression like that, right through the head, right out. But they're letting it go into the head and in through the ear, down into the heart, letting some transformation happening. And then they share it with the next person they run into. And so it continues. And so the power of that sound never really breaks because it continues down the lineage, right? They're carrying it on, they're carrying it, speaking it. So the topic, when I received the topic for today's class, it was, we speak about Krishna for our own purification. It's interesting, right? The topic. So one of the joys of being able to share about Krishna, or like if you've ever, who here has ever done a class? Raise your hand if you've ever given a class or led a discussion. Okay, so most people, right? In some form. So if you've noticed when you've done that, that sometimes by prepping for it, meditating on the class and the topic, you actually feel purified. Right? It's like, oh, the mercy of being able to facilitate a discussion or give a class, because you're actually meditating on the subject, and then you're purifying yourself in the process. So why is it that when we're speaking about Krishna, that we're purifying ourselves? Why is that? How is that? How does that happen? Yeah.
Because Krishna is none different from, I guess, his qualities and pastimes and names and activities. So when we discuss them, we get association with him, which purifies us.
Yes. Yeah. Different from other persons, right? Krishna is non-different from his pastimes, his form, his name, or his glorification. So exactly. So we come in direct contact with Krishna. Perfect answer. Any other thoughts on that? Yes.
When we talk or hear about Krishna, gradually we remember him. We remember who we are, who he is, and what our constitutional nature is.
Yeah, that's a really big one. It evokes remembrance. So when we study about him, or first we're reading the scripture, then we're maybe preparing our discussion, and then we're speaking about glorifying Krishna, or we're just having a conversation with a friend, glorifying Krishna in some way, like some realization I had. Then it's invoking or evoking, invoking, I think, this remembrance of Krishna. And that remembrance of Krishna, like Stephen was saying, it's transformative. It also brings us direct contact with Krishna. So the Prahlad Maharaj, he did Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam. He said that verse. There was a song, I'm sure some of you know it. Mrigakshi Prabhu, she wrote a song for children, right? Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu Smaranam Padasevanam Archanam Vandanam Dasyam Sakyam Atmani Vedanam. And then it goes in English, like hearing and chanting about the, and I don't actually remember. But it's just like it's kind of a sweet lullaby. But it's the idea being that all these work together. So when we speak about Krishna, we remember him. When we remember Krishna, we want to speak about him, right? They all go together in this really synergistic way. So let's now talk about this phrase chaste, unchaste, in the context of this verse. It's very interesting, right? He's saying, if I didn't glorify, Maitreya is saying, I'm now glorifying the Lord by pure speech. Whatever I've heard, I'm now using, I'm now speaking, right? I'm now describing what I've heard. And if I didn't do this, my power of speaking would remain unchaste. And then the purport, Prabhupada says, whenever we use our consciousness in a way that's misdirected, it's not spiritual, it's like unchaste. It's like dragging our consciousness away from Krishna. So the word chastity, I looked it up a little bit, and there's the first immediate thing that's described that we often think about with chastity is in terms of like a marital situation, like chastity of a spouse, faithfulness, right, in that kind of way. But there's other other meanings to chastity that apply here as well. There's like the meaning of loyalty, being committed, or faithfulness in general, right, being faithful. So we're thinking about our chastity to Krishna. What does that mean? It's very deep, our chastity as souls to Krishna. When I think about, well, actually, there's a Srimad Bhagavatam verse that it doesn't directly say this is a definition of chastity. However, you could use it as a definition of chastity in this context. It's the verse Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, right? So in that verse, in the first canto, the translation is the supreme occupation for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be what? Two things: unmotivated and uninterrupted, to completely satisfy the self. And Prabhupada, in the word for word, haitu ki apratiyata, right? Unmotivated, uninterrupted. He says causeless and unbroken. So same thing. But unmotivated and uninterrupted, that's exactly what you think about when you think about someone who's a chaste, loyal person, right? They're unmotivated, they're loving, right? An unmotivated way, giving to that person. And also uninterrupted. It's like it's a focus that's there. Like, this person is the object of my love. I'm not looking around with other eyes at other people. I'm really staying focused on this relationship, right? So similarly, as little jivas moving about this world, we can ask ourselves, like, when am I unfaithful to Krishna? When am I looking away, right? When am I looking outside of Krishna to try to find some happiness? Somehow I'm thinking Krishna is not going to fill me fully. This relationship with Krishna is not enough, and I have to like divert my attention in other ways. Just like you could think if someone's unhappy in a marriage or something, right? And they might start, like, their eyes might start wandering, that kind of idea, because that's often the use of chastity in that way. So we can also reflect on that in our relationship with Krishna. As we go about our day, we can think, well, let's see, how often does my consciousness, remember Prabhupada was saying consciousness has to focus on something. It can't be nothing, right? It has to focus somewhere. So when am I falling into Krishna consciousness or falling into Maya, right? We have two options basically, because we're going to focus on something. And it's very insidious. It kind of happens subtly and it's very quick. Like within a minute, we can kind of dabble between, like, right? Oh, Krishna. Oh, Maya. Oh, yeah. Pizza or whatever. It can happen so fast and so subtly. It's sometimes hard to untangle. Has anyone experienced that? We talked about that with we were joking about the japa scrolling, right? But there's that idea that we're like, okay, Krishna, I'm going to really finally chant for Krishna's pleasure. And then all of a sudden, something in our brain goes, oh, but I got to check that latest status update or whatever. I don't know. Whatever the thing is, I got to see what's happening with that friend, because the mind is so restless, right? It'll go all over the place, and we'll suddenly think about a friend living in Alaska, even though we're here in Gainesville. And so then we'll be like, oh, I need to just check, quickly check something. And so in that moment, what happened was we went from being loyal and chaste to Krishna to like, oh, something for me, some pleasure, right? It's not always that direct, because sometimes we need our phone for service. So I'm not saying anytime you go to your phone, it's that, but we can just be self-reflective and notice ourselves, not to point fingers at others, but to go, okay, what am I doing internally with my relationship with Krishna? Am I staying faithful to Krishna? In the Bible, the first commandment, I'm sure some of you know it. Do you remember the first commandment of the Bible? What is it? Okay, the first one, anyone know? So the first commandment of the Bible is, you shall have no other gods before me. So same idea, right? That you will be faithful to me. You won't be looking around other gods, like that. There's a loyalty that the devotee of Krishna has for Krishna, or the devotee of Ram has for Lord Ram. And even that reminds me, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, there was a devotee who was so in love with Lord Ram. What was his name again? Murari Gupta, yeah. He's the incarnation of Hanuman, I believe, yeah. And so he was so faithful to Lord Ram that one time Lord Chaitanya was saying, Krishna, try chanting Krishna's name, because that's the highest form of Krishna, right? The highest form of God is ultimately Krishna, supreme original person, Krishna. So Murari Gupta was trying to chant, and he did all night, or I think it was like a whole day and night. But he was crying because he was missing Lord Ram, right? He was feeling separation, because that was his Lord, is of his heart. And that is what touches Krishna when he sees that unwavering loyalty to him. So we can be, sometimes it's normal when we're beginning our devotional service to waver back and forth like a candle, right? If you think about a candle, we put it in a wavy, not a wavy place, a windy place. So imagine a candle, and we bring it in here, and then I turn on a fan, right? And the candle, the light's going to be like right all over the place. It's not steady because there's some external disturbance. So that's us in the beginning of our devotional life. We're kind of all over the place, like waving around the material energy. But as we become more and more internal with our relationship with Krishna, that candle light, that little flame, that just an analogy, it becomes steadier and steadier. And then the things around us, they don't disturb us as much. We become more equipoised, more content. So let's think for a moment about the opposite of this spiritual chastity that we were talking about. So in the material world, maybe the opposite is not the correct word, but let's think about it in the material context, what that looks like. So we don't have unmotivated, uninterrupted expressions of love in this world. It might come close. We might think, okay, maybe 95%, right? But no one be completely interrupted. It actually becomes kind of healthy, because that person would not be eating anymore. They would just be completely like merging into us, right? Like it wouldn't be possible. They would need to take care of their own body, go to shower, go to brush their teeth. They can't constantly be with us, right? So it has to be interrupted by the nature of this material bodies and life here in this material world. And it's also motivated very often. Even the sweetest, most loving relationships, there's something that we're getting from that other person, right? Usually, if there's just a material type friendship or relationship, there's usually something that we're getting from them that makes us want to go back. Like, I want to call that friend again because they give me a lot of jokes. They make me laugh. I feel good with them. Right? There's something a little bit usually motivated. And the other thing is, actually the ultimate, when I think about interrupted, the ultimate interruption is the end of life, right? So all of even the most, let's say we have the most loving relationship in this world, friendship or partner or family member, at the end of the day, that relationship gets interrupted by the passage of time. So we can't hold on to that. So that's the material context. But now if you think we're eternal spirit souls that are never time and this material energy doesn't actually affect who we really are, right? The soul, the bright, effulgent, joyful, full of knowledge soul. And just like Krishna, we're parts and parcels of Krishna. Who's also eternal. And so our relationship with him is based on that dimension. It's not interrupted, and it's not motivated, because we are our whole existence, our whole joy in life is to love Krishna and to be loved by Krishna. The problem is when we start to be like that little candle in the wind of the fan, right? It's like we're here in this world and we're not totally sure. We're not totally sure that Krishna is worthy of all of our attention, of all of our loyalty, of all of our chastity. Kind of, I have one foot in, but I'm a little cautious because I've been hurt before by relationships, right? So I don't know, or really, they say in Bhagavatam class that Krishna's gonna fill me up, that I'm gonna feel like it's enough, or do I need something else, right? So we can ask ourselves these questions. We can reflect on this. And the final point on this I want to just mention is Krishna is the best recipient of our loyalty. He's the ultimate, if we repository is that phrase, right? Where we put our things. So where we put our chastity, where we put our loyalty, Krishna is the ultimate person to do that with. He's the one that will completely be able to satisfy us in all regards. Even, we're hearing about the universal form in this chapter. Even the universal form is an aspect of Krishna that he has created for those of us who don't really want to be too close with him, right? We want to have our kind of illusion of living life happily without him. So even for us, Krishna is providing all the needs and all the necessities for our existence. So what a friend, what a incredible well-wisher that we have. So on our journey of deepening our faith, we can think, we can ask ourselves, so do I really believe that if I put my attention on Krishna, that I'll be satisfied? That he will be able to fill all my needs? Do I really believe that? And if not, that's okay, because we're not 100% there yet. But then we just try to associate with those who do feel that. And then our faith gets stronger. Just like when you take a little tiny candle, little tiny flame, and then you put it in a situation where there isn't that fan, right? The analogy only goes so far, but let's just say you take a little candle, you put it, surround it by other things. So you're surrounding it so that the flame doesn't get as, affected by the wind. Let's put like a little guard around it or something. So that's what the association is for us. It guards us when we're feeling all shaky and we're like, oh, I don't know. I think there's something out in the material world. I really want to experience that. Oh, it looks good. And what if I give my life to Krishna and then I regret it? These things can come up, these fears. And so if I put myself in the company of those who are solid, who are rooted, and who have that firm faith, not intellectual faith, but lived faith, I feel Krishna taking care of me. I trust that he is my ultimate friend. Then I will also become steadier, and I will feel that. I'll go, oh yes, my faith will grow. So that's the way to start to become like, following the footsteps of Maitreya here, becoming chaste in our relationship with Krishna. Okay, so we talked about, I'll just kind of share what we said. So we talked about getting a glimpse into conversations, right? And the purpose of the ear, the spiritual ear, and how that transforms the heart instead of going in one ear and out the other. And we talked about chastity, spiritual chastity to Krishna, what that looks like, putting him above others, right? Being there for him and him being there for us. So any comments or questions? Yes.
Thank you for the great class. This was really amazing. Just thinking, I have been thinking of a friend of mine who, before he found Krishna consciousness, he became, I guess you could say, like devotee of Lord Ganesh. And at the time, he was very much struggling with the material world, and he kind of took shelter of Ganesh and started chanting mantras, and his life got a lot better from that. And over time, he developed like chastity for Ganesh, and then he came to Krishna consciousness, and he's understanding the whole philosophy of Krishna supreme and everything, but he still feels like he doesn't want to abandon Ganesh, and so he's chanting on Krishna, but he also wants to chant his Ganesh mantra. So what would you say to him, in terms of chastity? Like, he doesn't feel like he can let go of,
Well, we're always grateful. You can talk to them about gratitude, because we're always grateful to those who bring us to Krishna, right? So in this case, it was Ganesh that brought him to Krishna. Really, it was helpful for him on his path. And Ganesh is known for removing obstacles. So those devotees or those persons, like some devotees in the community, are very grateful for Jesus Christ. They feel like indebted, and they don't let that go. They don't go like, oh, I'm done with Jesus now, I'm gonna just focus on Krishna. There's still gratitude there. There's still appreciation and respect, and other situations, other people that have helped us on our journey. So if we can remember in that context, like, yeah, Lord Ganesh, he's a great person, and just to remember that he is a servitor of Krishna, and that's all. Just to remember that those who help us, they're all subordinate to Krishna, and as long as we remember that Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead, then it's okay to have affection for his devotees, like Lord Shiva. Some devotees really love Lord Shiva, for instance, right? So these are all servitors of Krishna, and it's okay to have some affection for them, as long as you don't mix it up and go, okay, let's, if you go to some Hindu temples, you'll see like one altar where they're just all kind of given the same equal level, and that's where it gets a little like jumbly and messy. People get confused, like, why there's so many thousands of gods are all like, on the same level. So yeah, so as long as we keep it in the right context, then it's okay to feel that gratitude. Yeah, it's also higher taste, or over time. We don't have to prematurely let go of, like, he doesn't have to prematurely let go, because over time, like just being with Krishna, that will take over, because Krishna is the higher taste, obviously. Any other thoughts on that or on anything else? Yes.
I was just thinking, we're the shaky flame, and we take shelter of other devotees who are more steady. Is it not kind of selfish because it's like we're taking their association and they're taking ours, but we're like in the worst position?
Well, devotees actually get a lot of joy in helping those who are a little bit more shaky. I know it's kind of the idea of being like the devotees who are more advanced on the path. They love to help those who are coming along behind a little bit, right? They're, come on, I'll help you, and it brings so much joy to their hearts. So it's not selfish. It's a mutually loving experience, right? The seniors, the mentors, we've all experienced that. Our mentors helping us, and we feel so much gratitude. But it's not like we're just taking from them. They're also feeling connected to Krsna and Lord Chaitanya and the disciplic succession by helping us, right? They're also feeling, oh, I can do some service by helping this soul. And the other thing is that when a devotee, as we become more advanced, we become less affected by because we have our association, we have our connection with Krishna, we become less affected by those who are shaky. It's not like, oh no, they took my, in the material world, it's like that, right? Like an energy vampires, they call it, or like emotional vampires. So we feel completely drained after someone's like dumped on us, right? But as we become more solid in our spiritual practice, then if someone's going through hard times spiritually, it doesn't affect our faith really. So we can be there for them without feeling like drained and so on. Yeah. Sometimes if it's just peer to peer, it can be trickier because if someone else is also shaky in that same area, you have to be careful because sometimes you could like kind of go down together if you're not watching out, you know, like, oh yeah, I also have that doubt. Me too. Oh my gosh, I just start feeling the doubt together, right? That's risky. So we always have to find someone who can help us rise above or help us with the doubts. Yes.
Yeah, on Nate's point, I wanted to add, if it's okay, that it's not selfish because we experience gratitude when these senior devotees help us and then we serve them. So there's different exchanges that we can take like this. There's things we can do about it.
That's true. Yeah. It's not just a theoretical thing. You can take action, right? You can go and offer service, help out. Yeah, I know you've done that. Yeah, because I work for him, so sometimes I see Kartikeya doing some yard work for him. So things like that, yeah. So just going and helping and doing some service, it's really, really, really special. Yes, Prabhu.
Add to that if I could.
Yeah.
And that is that there's a difference between being selfish in terms of being focused on materiality and sense gratification, as opposed to being selfish, or not selfish, but centered on the self and seeking to gain help in my relationship with Krishna. And so I don't think there's anything wrong with being focused on my own spiritual life, because that's the only thing I can focus on, actually. And yeah, so I guess it's selfish in one way. You're centered on the self, which is, the whole purpose for the human form of life is to focus on the Lord. And in order to do that, we have to, focus on our own spiritual life.
Yeah, on our real self, right?
Yes.
Ourselves as a soul.
Yeah.
That's actually I love that point, because when we go to see our seniors or mentors, we can, or teachers, gurus, we can think, what can I do in their company to try to show up as my real self and ask questions from that place, like for my spiritual life, the real important things, right? Instead of getting caught up in, oh yeah, I had this drama happened, and kind of staying material with because then we lose the opportunity.
And the other thing is in that relationship is, and the Shastras tell us this, that we should seek to serve that person and trying to actually please them.
Mm.
So if we can find something to do for that person as a reciprocation, it makes it all the more sweeter.
Yeah. Even Krishna does that. So it goes all the way up the disciplic succession. Every single spiritual teacher in our succession does that with their predecessors, right? Service, wanting to be of service. And even Krishna at the very top, you could say he's the ultimate supreme person. He doesn't have to serve anyone. He's constantly serving. He's serving all of us by caring for us, right? All the time. He serves his devotees. So yeah, he's giving us that example that's the real joy, is to be of service. So I'm going to end here, and you'll have breakfast. Thank you all so much. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nashta praya.
It's okay.